Okay, so like I said, JavaScript is a powerful, versatile, specific purpose, client-side scripting language. Okay, so you can see all those keywords for developing interactive web applications. Okay, so a lot of those keywords, you may wonder what they mean or why is it important, and they are important. They have you know, specific meaning as to why they are used in that context. So a computer language has many dimensions. In a different slide, I'll see if I can find it. So a computer language can be both a high level or low level, right? High level meaning that the code you see, the syntax itself, will look very similar to our modern day English, right? It's like a sentence. If A is greater than B, then C, otherwise D, right? Sounds just like an English phrase. That's a high level language, and most of the languages today are high level, okay? The low levels are very few. The only one that is very popular still is assembler or assembly language. It's a very low level language. Low meaning it's as close as possible to machine language. Machine language is what? What's machine language? Zeros and ones, right? So usually just a binary, zeros and ones. So assembler is very close to that. It's not really zeros and ones, but it's close enough so that it's been categorized as a low-level language. Okay, and if you have never tried it, you can Google for it and then try it so you can use it. It takes a lot of effort just to do a simple addition. If you want to add two numbers, you have to move everything to a register, and then, you know, so it might take you like 5 or 10 lines of code just to do that simple addition. Whereas in a high-level language, you just say A is equal to 2 plus 3, right? You're done. Okay, and the downside of the high-level language is that it's much slower to process because it's so high up. Everything has to be converted down or translated back down to zeros and ones. So the closer you are to the machine, the faster it is, the higher up it is, then the slower the processing process. Okay, so most high languages now are up here, so it has to be translated back to zeros and ones. And so if you have a really bad language, right, in terms of how they are written, then it will take a lot of effort to translate or convert that into binary. Okay, so and then we have another dimension would be a specific purpose or a general purpose language, right? So initially, JavaScript was designed for a very specific purpose, and that is for basically just to develop interactive web applications, to provide the interaction for the user. That's all it does. Okay. A general purpose would be a language that you can use to develop many things, like Java is a general purpose. Visual Basic is the general purpose. So you can use that to build applications, build web pages, build other systems too. So you can use that for many purposes. And then, I mean, I can go on. There are many others, but one more I want to mention is that you have a what's another one? We have high level, low level, general, specific. You have another is like the what do you call it? Some are case sensitive, some are not. Right? You have that issue too. You have the client side, you have server side. Okay, so a JavaScript, as you can see here, is a client side language. Okay, client side meaning it runs on the client's machine, and the client side of it is, which is in this case, it's a web browser, right? It runs on a browser and not on the server. We'll talk about that later. And there's also something called a compile language versus an interpreted language. What does it mean, compile language? Like, for example, Java and Visual Basic, right? Those are compile languages because once you write the code, in order to run and use it, you have to compile it. So the compiler is a special program that will convert your code, your source code, into binary. So that compilation process may or may not, may take a while to process the conversion. Whereas a scripted language, just like JavaScript, is a interpreted language. I mean, it runs directly on the browser and it executes right away. It does not need to be compiled. and so on, like other languages. So it runs right away, and if you make changes, you can see the effects immediately on the screen. Okay, those are really fast. Okay, and there, of course, there are many other dimensions too. Okay, so JavaScript has evolved throughout the years, and it's moving to becoming more of a semi-general purpose, because now it doesn't really use for web development anymore. It's used for making games too. You can write games on really console games like on the Xbox or your PlayStation 2 using the Unity 3 engine, game development engine. Because on Unity 3, if you have never used it, it actually has 3 main languages, and JavaScript is one of them. Okay, so you can use that to build a completely full-fledged game using that engine there. And the other 2 languages mentioned are C# and Boo. Okay, I don't know what to call it, Boo, but Boo is a language developed by Unity 3 itself. So, it's just history of the web. I'm not going to go through this. You can read this information here. So I do want to show you that the first website is still up and running. If you have never seen it, okay, if you never visited this site, this is way back in 91? Around there or so. This is the first site. Okay, that is, it still has the same code way like it used to be back then. This is a much better version now. Okay, initially it looked something like this. Okay, this is back in early HTML, World Wide Web back in the 90s. Okay, we didn't have all these beautiful graphical interface that we have it now. But back then it was a lot of just text, but it was the web. And of course, you can see how much we have come within the last 30 years or so. But it's still there, so if you can go and look at it, you can still review the source code. You see that the tags are still very similar. Some of these are very dated, so it's no longer being used. But as you can see, the browser still renders them correctly. So the header, if you notice, there's no the doc type. You don't have that in here. You have something called next ID, which we don't have that anymore. And a few of these other tags are still here, but some are it's completely new because we never use them anymore. Okay, so that's the first website ever been released back in 91 or so. So I just want to show you that here, just in case if you ever wonder. And then we have the browser and the JavaScript. So we have the browser war back in the mid-90s. This is right around 95. Back then, the major browser was Netscape. Watching was Mosaic first, right? And then after that, Netscape came out in 94. So here's a picture of that Netscape. This is a beautiful logo. I used to remember that all the time. I used to run, and you see the little light that would, run across the screen, the icon there, while it's loading your page. So, memory lane. But so right around 94 or so it came out, and then 95, then Netscape was pretty much the major player in the market until Microsoft jumped in and then they compete, right? But right around that time, they, meaning Netscape, they created JavaScript, okay? And initially it was not called JavaScript, it was called LiveScript. It was actually called Mocha. I don't know why it's ready to copy everything, but Mocha. And then they changed it to LiveScript, right? And then they changed it again to JavaScript. And it's during this time that Java, which has had no relation with JavaScript whatsoever. Java was developed by, at the time was Sun's system before Oracle. And Java gained a lot of popularity at the time, and so in order for, I guess they were thinking that in order for LiveScript to be popular out there, they have to rename it to something that relates to Java. It's just the name itself, but the language is completely different. I mean, it has both good and bad effects at the time, because Java was a really complicated language to learn at the time, so it's kind of have that negative, view from most people. It's really complex language to learn, but it's very popular. So because when you hear the word JavaScript, just the term Java, kind of like turn people off. Okay, until later on, a couple years later, that people start to see how the code starts to work because they provide what's called a dynamic HTML. Okay, it's all about interactive. So back then, HTML was just pretty much static. Okay, it's just information site. You want to see something, yeah, you can browse and search for it. You can see it, but there's no interaction. Okay, so to make it interactive, you have to provide some type of technology to do that, to give you this dynamic HTML, and JavaScript was the language to do that. So when that came out, then we had the browser war. So that's why it's in here. And then, so I mean, it was pretty brutal that time because IE and Netscape, okay, and then we have so others too, but those are two players. So if you want to build a site for Netscape, your code will only work on Netscape. And if you want to capture the people who use IE, well, you have to build another site for IE too, right? So two sites have to be running along side by side, so they will work. And it got pretty bad. That so I'm very, very happy that they had a way to standardize that script. Okay, so enter ECMA, because ECMA is a symposium or association in Europe that would, I would say, standardize JavaScript, and they call it ECMAScript. So when you see the term ECMAScript or JavaScript, they are the same. They mean the same thing. So now, so JavaScript, we have a different version number. ECMAScript has a different version number because they're just named differently, but they still mean the same thing. And so here I have a list of different versions when they came out, and so on. Okay, so 97, that's when the first edition of JavaScript came out. And now we're here in 2017, 18, so we're still using ECMAScript 7. So that is still the latest version. And surprisingly, not every browser supports that yet, okay, as you can see. So most browsers still support version 6. Okay, so when you run your code in the class, and I'll show you in the WebStorm, you want to make sure you switch that to ECMAScript 6, okay? Because 7, some browsers are not updated, so they don't recognize that yet. So 6 will be the safer way to do. Sometimes you might have to go back to version 5, okay? But 6 is still okay. And the only thing is that you can't control it because it's built into the browsers. So whatever browsers you have, whatever they install, it's what you get. Okay, so you can. But I think again, most browsers now have ECMAScript 6 in there already. So we're pretty good to go. So you don't have to do any type of, insertion of the script in your pages. It just works. Okay. More history can be read about him in this link here. And then I just want to touch the last thing here about client-side and server-side architecture. It's important to understand what these are. So if you want to go into writing your own program, or if you work for a company, you can make suggestions as to what technologies to use, right? If you don't understand where JavaScript lies, then you really don't have much to say in there. Okay, so we have this client-server-side architecture that you probably see this similar diagram maybe a million times by now. But the client is not the computer. Okay, just to make sure that's completely clear. It's not really the computer. In this case, the client, when we say client, is really just your browser. Okay, your browser is your client. It's a client side. And then the server, as you can see, is like, if you look at this diagram, it's just like it's a separate machine itself. You can think of it that way because it's just easier for us to see it, to conceive it that way. But in your laptop, or your machine, your desktop, doesn't matter. You can have both of these on the same machine, right? So when your browser is your client side, and you can have a server installed on your laptop, and that's your server side. Okay, so when they communicate, you're going from the browser to the server. So you have that two-tier, we call this the two-tier architecture. Okay, so client side and server side. There's also a third tier. So a third tier or three-tier will be where we have the database integrated in there, right? So somewhere on the server side here, we have the client connected to the server will connect to a database. So that's a third tier. Okay, so a three-tier. And you have a fourth tier where you have another container in there. That may be at a fourth tier. So if you remember in Java or Java 2, right, we have a container called Tomcat, right? So you have the client side, the browser, go to Java server, that's another one. They have a container called Tomcat, and that Tomcat will talk to a database. So that's 4 tiers. Okay, and you can go more. You can go on to what's called an N tier. Okay, so we have the N tiers or all these many tiers. We're talking about different components working together like this. Okay, so but for this class, we'll be usually just working on the two-tier system here. So the client and the server. Okay, and mostly we're just basically working on the client side because JavaScript, as you know, is mostly on the client side. So you can build everything on the client side without even going to the server. Okay, that means that JavaScript does not interact with the server. It does not connect to a database. It does not do any of the server side stuff, right? Like you would with like PHP and so on. Okay, so that means it does not write files. It does not read files on the server, other than writing cookie files. That's all it does. Okay, that's why you can build everything on the client side. I mentioned a little bit above that it's evolved now that JavaScript is becoming more and more popular on the server side too. You can use that as well using something called the Node.js technology. You heard that before, right? So Node.js allows you to actually use JavaScript as the main language to write server-side code. So it's changing how JavaScript is being used in today's world. Okay, so I think that's it for my lecture. And then one more thing I want to just go over is, I don't have the slide here, but I'll just do it right here for you can see it, is that when we start coding, so we have on the website, we have several layers of technology working together. Okay, so we have on the very top, however you want to envision this, top or bottom layer, doesn't matter, is we have to, this is the highest level, the window. Okay, so at the window layer, that's your screen. So if you look at this here, so I have a tab called JavaScript in one lecture, right? That's your window. Okay, so that's the layer that contains everything on this screen here. So each tab is a window. So that's the window layer. That's the highest, or if you want to call it the lowest, however you want to do it, is the window was the layer that encompasses everything. Okay, so we have the window layer. I'm talking about objects here. So the window here, the tab here is called the window layer or the window object. Okay, so every page, every website you go to has a window object. Okay, so under the window object we have the and then we have the DOM, right? The DOM tree. You have what's called the document object model. So we have the document layer. Okay, so let me just do this. So the document is where the code for this website lives. Okay, the actual code itself. So it's not an object that is a child of the window object. And you'll understand this a little bit later when we start, debugging the code in the browser. You'll see what those are. And then under that, we have another layer. We have the HTML layer, right? This is your HTML code, your tags. I should probably maybe. Okay. Yeah, so you have the HTML, And I'm gonna do this way because we're more familiar with HTML. So HTML is the actual code, the tag itself that holds your web page. Okay, above that we have the CSS layer, right? So the CSS is the style sheet that actually formats and style all the HTML tags. Back in the old days, in the 90s when we didn't have CSS yet, we actually had some tags that actually allows us to format the HTML with the layout, right? So the color background, the border of a table, all of those were available at the time directly as an attribute we use in the tag to style the page. But that was not very efficient, so they came up with a new way of styling HTML, and they have that what's called the cascading style sheet, or CSS. So now all your tags, you can just write your tag. This one here is the structure, right? The actual structure, or the physical structure of your web page, right? It contains just the text itself. So the body tag, the paragraph tag, and so on. So you use that to style, put everything in place. And then this CSS is the style. Okay, it styled it. This is also called the presentation. Okay, presentation layer, which is also called a presentational language. CSS is. Okay, all it does is just present your web page in a very nice manner. And this one here actually was called the what's this? Semantic layer or language. Okay, so HTML is a semantic language because all your tags should have meaning to what they are used for, right? You have a P tag for your paragraph, you have a video tag just to store your video, and so on. So the semantic, they give meanings to objects or things on your web page. They have the CSS layer, and then you have above here the JavaScript layer. So this is the interaction, okay, called the script layer. So this, as you can, if you look at this, so the HTML is like the lowest layer, okay, that contains your actual code. So under HTML, if you want to go a little bit deeper, you have like what's called the text itself. Okay, the actual text, the component you see on the web page. And so what that means is that you can use CSS to manipulate HTML. That's why we're able to style all your tags, right? It has to be above that, so CSS can style your web pages, all the tags, change different color, give it a different font size, and so on. So you can use that to style your page. And it does give you some interactions. Like you can build a really nice drop-down menu navigation. You can hide things based on where you click to. You can do that with CSS. And then above that is the JavaScript. So this is what we will be doing mostly in this class, is the JavaScript. And you'll be coding that because JavaScript, as you can see, can manipulate both CSS and HTML and the text. Okay, so everything below that, JavaScript can manipulate. So that's why you see that in some web pages, you click on something, the text change without reloading your web page. If you click on something, something disappears or changes color or move, all of those stuff are controlled by JavaScript. Okay. Okay, so that is pretty much how I envision a web page. Okay, so if you understand these different layers, then you know that, okay, so JavaScript works on this layer, so therefore I can use JavaScript to write all the CSS code without writing the actual code itself. Okay, if you know the tag, if I know the HTML tag, let's just say, paragraph tag with an ID of paragraph 1, I can manipulate that paragraph 1 tag, and I can use JavaScript to dynamically change its content and issue its own CSS, which is a virtual CSS, to change the content without having you to write any CSS code at all. Okay, so that's why JavaScript gives you all that power to do it. Okay, so we'll be doing a lot of that, those stuff in this class, and it's quite fun and addictive. I guarantee you that once you get this thing, you understand, see how things work, you're probably spending like hours into the night, and you might just get lost in I don't know, not translation, but I don't know, moments. All right, so that's my very quick and brief overview of these three different layers. We have the semantic. Okay, so I usually call this the three S's, right? For semantic, okay, style, and then you have the scripts. Okay, so just know where they sit in terms of in the window object, then you can access those. And the reason why I put window and then document here is because later on when you write your code, when you interact with the tag down here inside your HTML, you have to go through this tree here. And this is what's made up the DOM tree. The document object model is made up of something like this. So you will access the window object dot document dot what? Dot body dot HTML or something. Okay? So we'll be revisiting this again in the future. I'm pretty sure. All right, so